the game, it is oh so strange.
We're going to continue our series on faith. Today's session will be on the faith to build. Last week's session was on the faith to give. We covered the story of Cain and Abel. Today we're going to study and analyze the story of Noah and his faith to build the ark. But before we dive into Noah's actual actions and what he built, we need to understand what his father left him with. So his father's name was Lamech. And if you're in Genesis chapter 5, verse 28, it says, when Lamech was 182 years old, he became the father of a son. Lamech named his son Noah, for he said, may he bring us relief from our work and our painful labor of farming this ground that the Lord has cursed. So essentially what we see before Noah was even brought to the earth was cursed and it was filled with a lot of wickedness. And so Lamech, who is Noah's father, through his words, through his hope, through his optimism, he began to speak things into the future. He began to ask God, use my son to deliver us from all this painful labor, from the ground that the Lord has cursed, because it was a lot of wickedness going on in the earth. So if we continue into the story of Noah, what we see is that the Bible tells us that Noah was the only righteous man. Out of everybody who was on earth at the time, Noah was the only righteous man. And God saw this. So God called on Noah. He said, Noah, this is what I need you to do. I need you to build an ark. I'm going to wipe out everybody, all of these mortal beings on earth right now because of their wicked ways, because of their actions, because of the things that they do, because they think too wickedly. He says, I'm going to use you. So what that means is Noah's wife, Noah's sons, his sons' wives were all wicked. And as we continue to read in Genesis, the story of Noah, every time the Lord gives instructions to Noah, Noah just acts, right? So we see his display of obedience, right? He doesn't go and consult it with his wife because she wasn't living right. She wasn't doing the right thing. She was not righteous. Neither were his kids. And so I think we can learn that when God instructs us to do something in our lives from that first scripture in Genesis, we have to just act. Everything is not meant for everybody to see, for everybody to know, for everybody to understand. It's just not. And so Noah was given the instructions to build this lofty ark. Now I'm going to describe what this ark essentially looked like. So this is the Lord instructing Noah. It says in Genesis chapter 6, verse 14, it says, build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it with tar inside and out. Then construct decks and stalls throughout its interior. Make the boat 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Leave an 18-inch opening below the roof all the way around the boat. Put the door on the side and build 3 decks inside the boat, a lower, a middle, and an upper. Now, when we're thinking and analyzing these instructions that God just gave to Noah, understand that they're very specific. And so when the Lord gives us instructions in our lives, they're going to be specific, right? The moves that he wants us to make are going to be specific. And so through Noah's faith, which is what we're talking about, the faith to build, we understand that Noah, because he went ahead and built this lofty ark, which took time, Noah essentially saved his family because of his righteousness. And so if I can live righteously, if she can live righteously, if he can live righteously, if you can live righteously, we can literally save our family's future, right? But it takes that faith to build. And so there are some things in our lives that God is asking us to build that we're being disobedient, or it could be out of fear. It could be out of our fleshly desires. We are not building. And so if we listen to God's instructions, they're specific. And here's the thing about God. God is not going to do the work for you. So God will tell you to do something. God will tell you, you need to build this. Nate, go build this. Nate, start this company. Nate, start this business. Nate, get involved in this ministry. God is going to tell you what to do. God is not going to do the work for you. And so we see Noah, through his obedience, he got these instructions. And if we go further down to verse 22 in chapter 6 of Genesis, it says, so Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. So then we see the flood come, right? And this is another thing. God gives Noah these instructions to build this ark based on the warning of something that's never happened before at that time. God says, I'm going to flood the entire earth, right? And wipe out all the animals, all the birds, all the people. Everything will be wiped out. And it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. No, he tells him in 7 days, this rain is going to start. So Noah gets to working, Noah builds. And so by the time the rains and the floods and everything begins to happen, Noah, who was in the ark with his family and with the pairs of all the animals that he added to the ark, they were safe through the storm. And so whenever God asks you to build something, understand that storms will come, floods will come, problems will arise, obstacles will arise. But it's our duties to understand that God's protection is always going to be with us. So initially we see Lamech, who is Noah's father, through his words for generations to come. He says, I need you, Lord, to use my son to deliver us, to deliver the people from painful labor. I need you to use my son. So through his belief, through his words initially, he has this son Noah. And then we see through Noah's righteousness, through Noah's actions on a daily basis, God chooses him, because the Bible tells us that Noah was the only righteous person on earth at the time. Next, we see obedience, right? The Lord gives Noah instructions. He says, listen, I need you to build this ark. I want it to be this feet tall, this feet wide. I need it to be gigantic. I need it to be massive. And the thing about the faith to build is that God is going to ask us to do things that are not easy jobs, folks, that are not easy jobs. This is a massive job for somebody to build this ark, and it takes intense listening. And so I don't think that we should fool ourselves into believing that just because God asks us to build something, that it's going to be a small job. That's not the case. So when God asks you to build something, understand if it's massive, it's for a reason. So through his righteousness, he saved his family. Through his righteousness, he saved his family. Noah had the faith to build, and there are things that God is asking us to build that we probably aren't building or that we have not built yet. So as we continue to read through Genesis, we see that Noah builds the ark. He takes his family, his sons, their wives on the ark, the pairs of the animals on the ark, and they're in this storm. They're in the midst of a storm for a long time. But we begin to see as the flood begins to recede, Noah's checking frequently to see if the flood is receding. He sent the dove out to check. And when the water begins to recede, and this is where it gets beautiful. In chapter 8, verse 20, it says, Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and there he sacrificed as burnt offerings the animals and the birds that had been approved for that purpose. And the Lord was pleased with the aroma of the sacrifice and said to himself, I will never again curse the ground because of the human race, even though everything they think or imagine is bent toward evil. So what we begin to see is that as soon as God's promise is confirmed, as soon as Noah literally sees that the flood has receded and the ark and his family and everybody's safe, they immediately begin to give an offering to the Lord, right? And so if we translate this to today's society, to things that we're going through, understand that when you see that promise fulfilled, when God literally proves to you, okay, this was my covenant, this was my agreement, and I made it happen for you, we have to give God praise. We have to give our offerings. We have to sacrifice things, right? So we see Noah's faith to build. Now, it's not easy to build. It's not easy to build at all. And the things that God asks us to build, it may seem far-fetched. It may seem crazy. Imagine how Noah looked to other people at the time who were watching him build this ark, being warned of something that had never happened before. But through his righteousness, through his obedience, and through his faith to build, he ended up saving his family. And so I want to leave you guys with this. If we analyze this story of Noah, understand the words of his father are powerful. So your words are extremely powerful. This could be for fathers. This could be for mothers, kids, daughters, someone. If you have kids, if you don't have kids, understand your words for what you believe the future could possibly have can literally change the course of your generations to come. It could change their life. So we see Lamech through his words. He asked God, he said, use my son Noah to save my people from painful labor and to make a difference. But then we see Noah as he lived righteous, as he was the only righteous person on earth. God uses him. God gives him specific, massive instructions to build an ark. And Noah had the faith to build. Noah didn't go and consult with his wife or ask permission to anybody to build. So we see Lamech's words. We see Noah's faith to build, his obedience. You don't need permission to build what God has called you to build. And through our righteousness, through our faith, through our obedience, we can literally save our generations to come. Our kids, our kids' kids, our kids' kids' kids. We can literally save them from the floods, from storms, from problems, from obstacles, through our obedience and through our righteousness. But it takes the faith to build. It takes courage.